We know, of course, that 1/3 of Pakistan is underwater today. And in Jackson, Mississippi, very recently, 1 million water bottles have been handed out. This is the climate crisis in action. But in Africa, climate shocks are going to hit home even harder. And we must be ready for it. But as you said, President Macky Sall, Africa itself will not stop. It has awoken. It is the engine of the world economy. But it won't continue unless Africa adapts. All of us, everywhere, would feel the fallout of Africa not adapting. It cannot be contained. But we don't have to go there. This year, I have been extremely inspired by my travels in Africa. I was in Kenya, I was in DRC with you, President Tshisekedi. I was in Ghana visiting you, President Akufo-Addo. And only a few days ago, I was with you, President Macky Sall, in Senegal. I've seen firsthand Africans taking adaptation action. I've seen the resilience of the people. Africa is standing up, and its adaptation solutions are ready to be scaled up. And when I was in Kenya, I visited a community in Makwene. And there was a song, and Secretary General Nfaike, I will not sing it here, I will not embarrass particularly myself, but the lyric was, you climb a mountain and you find good things on top of it. So you climb a mountain and you find good things on top of it. And adaptation in Africa is like climbing this mountain. But it is also a massive opportunity for transformation, for jobs, for growth, for development. And I'm sure that with all of you in this room today, if you look around, just look around briefly, with all of you here in this room today, we have the dream team to climb this mountain together. So, Excellencies, of course, as part of our journey climbing this mountain, the next summit after today is Sharm el-Sheikh. But success in Egypt will hinge on whether Africa's needs are met or not. And adaptation action in Africa needs to be front, it needs to be center. Fortunately, Africa has the commitment. Fortunately, Africa has the plan. We just saw in the video the AAAP, the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program. It's Africa developed, it's Africa owned. It was launched by Africa's leaders, and Africa's leaders are here with us again today. They remind us that the AAAP is Africa's flagship venture, and that it is the vehicle for delivering the Africa Adaptation Initiative. The program, it has the scale, the program has the ambition to deliver what Africa and the African Union expects in terms of adaptation support. No other African adaptation projects comes close in terms of ambition. What is it? A $25 billion over 5 years program. Is that too ambitious? No. Africa's adaptation finance gap is $41 billion a year. AAAP is therefore about turning the tide on resilience in Africa. And what is more, the AAAP already has the track record to deliver. Since launching last year, more than $3 billion of investments on the ground for people in Africa have become reality. And half of the needed funds, $12.5 billion, are already there. The other half, though, another $12.5 billion, remains to be mobilized. My very good friend, my big brother, President Adesina, is going to update you on the way forward on the AAAP, on the billions for Africa. And obviously, that's also why it's good that Mahmoud is here with us. COP27 is the opportunity to close in on that target. Another realistic milestone for COP27 is to complete the more modest $250 million upstream financing facility. What is that? Well, actually, it's the transmission belt to mainstream adaptation in all large-scale projects of the DFIs. It's the millions needed to shape the trillions and the billions. With its demonstrated leverage ratio of 1 to 100, the upstream financing facility is also a smart investment. It's good value for your money. So let's make the upstream financing facility and the ADF replenishment, which Akin will talk about, a success in Sharm el-Sheikh. And in doing so, let us secure presidency. Africa is unstoppable indeed by unlocking its full adaptation potential together. And that is the adaptation breakthrough for COP27 we're all striving for. We have to double down on adaptation this year. The Global Center on Adaptation, we thank every one of you for being part of this movement for many, many years. But let's now turn this summit today into an action agenda. And it's my honor to first invite the co-conveners of this summit today. First and foremost, the person who is driving this agenda when you were at the helm of the United Nations. The person who is the co-chair of the board of the Global Center on Adaptation, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, CEO Professor Patrick Verkooyen, for your very inspiring opening statement. Your Excellency, President Macky Sall of Senegal and President of the African Union, and also co-chair together with me. Your Excellencies, President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana, President Tshisekedi of Democratic Republic of Congo, and Honorable Kristalina Georgieva of IMF Managing Director, Honorable Amina Mohamed, UN Deputy Secretary General, President Akinwumi Adesina, the African Development Bank, Diafaike Sibesma, my co-chair of the board, Honorable Mayor of Rotterdam, Ahmed Abu Taleb, and Minister Mark Harbers, and distinguished participants and ministers. It's a great honor for me to co-chair this important GCA Adaptation Summit meeting in the presence of many African presidents and European ministers, heads of international organizations. The world has a fever. You have probably heard me say this before many times. I make no apologies for that because, tragically, the patient is not on the mend. The fever burns hotter and higher with every day that passes. In recent weeks, my own capital city, Seoul, has suffered as the heaviest rainfall in 115 years. More than 10 people were killed. Pakistan has fared much worse. More than 1,000 deaths, or nearly 1 million hectares of crops destroyed, hundreds of bridges washed away, a third of the country underwater. Just 12 years ago, when I was serving as a Secretary General, I saw for myself, my own eyes, what had happened to Pakistan. Pakistan is now being washed away after 12 years. The length of the devastated area, I was told at the time, 1,600 kilometers. I was appalled to have seen myself. And it is happening again. The world has a fever called climate change. We are all suffering. But the science and statistics tell us that Africa is where the fever is at its most intense, where people are at their most vulnerable. Africans make up nearly a fifth of the world's population, yet they contribute almost nothing to global warming. Africa is responsible for less than 3% of the world's total greenhouse gas emissions. Out of the world's 10 countries most vulnerable to climate change, 9 of them are in African continent. We have a moral duty to nurse the planet back to health, but we also have the common sense to know that unless we heal the patient, we will all suffer the consequences. We will all live or we will all die if we do not take action now. It's not all gloom. The good news is that we have a start. We have a roadmap. Let me take you back to January 2021, last year, where this begins. It starts with the launch of the African Adaptation Acceleration Program. We call it the AAA for short. A few months later, GCA and African Development Bank with the African Union and the Africa Adaptation Initiative convened the largest meeting ever of African and global leaders on climate change, and the AAA was endorsed by all of them, yourselves. From there, we moved to Glasgow for COP26. I see Alok Sharma in the room. And Alok, you deserve a round of applause because it was in Glasgow. Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister Alok. We've been speaking many times in the past few months. He deserves a round of applause because it was in Glasgow that the world agreed to deliver on the Paris Agreement by committing to doubling adaptation financing. This firm commitment now sees to turn into urgent action. The AAA is Africa's plan for how to respond to the climate crisis by mobilizing $25 billion for adaptation in the areas of food security, resilient infrastructure, climate finance, and youth employment. The AAA is working through 2 mechanisms. It has the upstream financing facility, which GCA hosts, which is mobilizing $255 million over 5 years to help African countries access the best knowledge, science, and solutions. And the second mechanism is the climate window, which is part of the African Development Bank under the leadership of President Adesina. Since Glasgow, we are moving into higher gears. We at GCA are working together with our partners, with the AFDB, the World Bank, the European Investment Bank, with African institutions, with governments and civil society, with the private sector, and with the youth constituencies. We have, under the impressive leadership of CEO Patrick Verkooyen, already influenced $3 billion of investments through the upstream financing facility. $1 invested in the facility leads to $100, 100 times influenced to bring the best adaptation solutions to Africa. But the upstream financing facility can do so much more. Its potential is huge. With this leverage ratio of 1 to 100, this is truly a winning investment. And it is for this reason that I am calling upon all our development partners to engage with us and to contribute and to deliver on the Glasgow Pledge to double adaptation finance. I have visited recently Ukraine, August 16. I have seen for myself the terrible cost this senseless war is inflicting, not just in Ukraine, but around the world. The people of Ukraine are suffering, and the shock waves are causing pain across Europe and further afield, particularly including Africa. It is Africa that is bearing the brunt of the pain with the triple crisis of fuel, finance, and fertilizer. If all goes to proof, if proof were needed, how interconnected the world today is. We cannot address the crisis in Ukraine in isolation. We cannot forget about Africa. That is why this is the time to invest in adaptation for Africa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let us work to make this world, particularly African continent, sustainable for succeeding generations. Thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, for your very bold statement, but also particularly for your very bold action in real time, indeed. Before I introduce the next co-convener, I also want to recognize and acknowledge Prime Minister Jan-Peter Balkenende, the former Prime Minister in the Netherlands, who also is part of the board of the GCA. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for joining us today. Now, let me introduce the next speaker. Today, there will be issues which you will have. You may not speak long enough, or there are issues, and protocol doesn't work. All the mistakes, that's me. But all the good things which are happening with GCA today, yesterday, and tomorrow is actually because of one person who is not only a good friend, he's also my mentor for many, many years. And he is, alongside Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the co-chair of the board of the Global Center on Adaptation. He is also a man of action, representing the business community. Feike Siebesma, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I take all the compliments up front, so appreciate it, Patrick. Excellencies, colleagues and friends, appreciate it. And as co-chair, like Patrick said, of the board of GCA, together with Secretary General Ban, and also as co-founder and co-chair of the 125 Global Climate Business Leaders of the WEF, I would like to thank you for being here today at this wonderful floating headquarters, a kind of ark that adapts on the rising waters around us, thanks to Mayor Abu Taleb of Rotterdam. Thank you very much for being able to be here. This is an important moment of adaptation to the climate agenda. We are 2 months away from COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, and I'm happy that Mahmoud is here, and I'm happy that Alok is here. The world is working hard on implementation of the Paris Treaty, but we must unfortunately concluding that at this stage we are not yet on track to prevent and reduce CO2 emissions in order to keep global warming beneath the 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. Mitigation is, of course, an imperative if we want to have a future, but we cannot escape from the fact that climate change is already there right now. Here in Europe, we have faced a summer wake-up call, devastating heat records, wildfires raging across Spain, Portugal, France, trade disrupted by record low waters in the River Rhine, etc. That's caused by the glacier melt in Switzerland. So since we are unsuccessful in previous decades in reducing the emissions, climate change is now making its presence, and it is felt more and more around the globe. It brings almost the story of the frog in the boiled water and not noticing during that period what is happening. Climate change uses to be something of the future, but like I said, it is something today. And sadly, the countries that are most vulnerable to climate change have done the least to cause it. So in Africa, and the vanguard of vulnerability, and that is why adaptation to climate events are so important and are overwhelming even. Also communities in Africa and other areas it is so important to address. GCA is fully engaged with governments, with international organizations like WTO, like IMF, like the World Bank, UN, also present here. But we acknowledge that nearly 80% of the trillions that will be needed for adaptation has to come from the private sector, with whom we need to engage much more, with whom is hardly present here today and at the climate agenda. And I speak as someone who is head and heart from the private sector. And I can tell you the private sector is behind its step up on climate adaptation. The private sector is sometimes too slow with mitigation and reduction of emissions, but are working on it, but is quite unaware about the adaptation actions and what need to be done and what they can do in their own supply chains, as well as contributing to the global agenda via their technologies and solutions. GCA, under Patrick's leadership, will step up its efforts to engage and also involve the private sector. The benefits of this are mutual. The private sector can gain from this enormously, and it can contribute to many countries in the world. The private sector companies that are dependent, to give you an example, on agricultural input streams, have a risk, have a vulnerability, and need to become resilient. And I'm thinking about not only the food industry, but also chemistry, pharmaceuticals, others, who need to identify the risk they have in their own supply chains and their own sustainability, their own resilience to climate change. If they don't adapt, they can suffer a lot of losses. But also companies not only in the supply chains, but are in areas located with their locations and sites where water rising, droughts or flooding can jeopardize their operations. So we need to address this. But there's a second reason why the private sector should be involved in this. And that is simply due to the fact that their money, that their solutions, that their technology, that their innovations, that even their business can help countries and societies to become more resilient. And for those two reasons, I believe the private sector should step up. Our aim is to integrate the private sector much more as an actor, and I hope that the governments are also here present, especially from Africa, but also European countries. I hope that they can help me in engaging the private sector. This is a collective effort, all sectors, and we need to step up. Without much higher determination, it's inevitable that the world will be witness to far bigger waves of immigration. And that is a third reason why we need to step up on this whole climate adaptation to make countries much more resilient compared with today. That's a self-interest of Europe, clearly. That's a self-interest of other areas in the world also. And therefore, to conclude, we need the support of all of you. And I'm very glad and even proud that all of you are here. GCA is helping to set the agenda, to do the advocacy, that people know what adaptation is and why it's needed right now. Secondly, we do the research and develop solutions which can be implemented and spread around the world. And thirdly, we are also supporting, facilitating, coordinating sometimes the implementation of those solutions, for example, together with Hakim Adesina in the AAAP program. And we do that in the 6 chosen areas: in food, in water, infrastructure, cities, taking care of the finance of it, and involve the next generation youth involvement. With that, we can make GCA's activities contributing to a better world, a more resilient world, a more sustainable world. So let's get on with it, and I look forward to collaborate and to work with all of you, together with my co-chair, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and of course with our leader of all these operations, Patrick Verkooyen. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Feike, for your strong words. Before we come to our African heads of states imminently, and before we come to people who are still online, we also have the President of Ethiopia online joining us really soon. We're, of course, very keen to hear her views. I want to introduce a man who let me tell you a fun fact. A man who does not sleep, a man who treats the climate emergency as the emergency it is, whether it's 4 a.m. in the morning or 7 p.m. or a Saturday or a Sunday, it doesn't matter. You will receive the phone call for to do something for Africa, with Africa. President Adesina.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my dear brother Patrick Bakwejian. If you say I don't sleep, I don't know what you do. I think you have incredible renewable energy. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says you can call at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, so you keep us all awake. Thank you for all you do. Your Excellency, former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, thank you, Chair of the Global Center on Adaptation, my dear brother Feke. Your Excellencies, President Macky Sall, Chairman of the African Union and President of Senegal, Your Excellency, President Nana Akufo-Addo, President, Your Excellency, President Felix Tshisekedi, my dear sister, United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, Chairman, Chairperson Musa Faki of the African Union Commission, my dear sister Ngozi, DG of WTO, my sister Kristalina Georgieva of the MD of the IMF, development finance ministers all around here, from Europe, from Africa, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I wish to thank you very much for honoring the invitation from former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, myself, President Macky Sall, and also from Patrick, and of course, for all of you to be here today. I wish to thank you, Ahmed Abu Taleb, the Mayor of Rotterdam, for your great hospitality for having us here. You are all here because you are friends of Africa. Africa is facing 3 major challenges, which are called the 3 Cs: COVID, climate, and conflict. The solution to the 3 Cs is the same: 3 Fs: finance, finance, and finance. Africa was still dealing with the financing recovery from COVID when conflict broke out as Russia invaded Ukraine, triggering soaring food prices and inflation. To forestall potential food crisis in Africa from the Russia's war in Ukraine, the African Development Bank announced on May 29th a $1.5 billion Africa Emergency Food Production Facility. The facility, to support 20 million farmers, will provide access to climate-resilient seeds for maize, for wheat, for rice, and soybeans, and support the production of 38 million metric tons of food valued at $12 billion. The approvals on the facility have been incredibly fast. Within 60 days, the bank has approved $1.13 billion for operations in 24 countries, and we expect to reach 35 countries at the end of this month. Your Excellencies, Africa now needs a lot of financing to tackle climate change, as you have heard. The continent is warming up faster than any region of the world, as predictions from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change show that the critical global warming levels will be reached much earlier in Africa. The effects will be devastating: loss of crops, decimation of livestock populations, and livelihoods of pastoralists, while child wasting will increase by 37% in West Africa and 25% in East Africa. A 1-degree increase in temperature is also going to be associated with 11% greater risk of conflict in Africa, as it triggers weather-related disasters and conflicts, with already 4.3 million Africans already displaced due to climate change. According to the estimates of the African Development Bank, GDP losses per capita could rise as high as 16 to 64% under the high warming scenario. In the face of this deluge, Africa does not have the resources to tackle climate change. The continent receives only 3% of global climate financing, and if this trend continues, Africa's climate financing gap will reach $100 billion to $127 billion per year through 2030. The current financing of climate in the world is not meeting the needs of Africa. New estimates from the African Development Bank in our African Economic Outlook actually shows that Africa will need between $1.3 to $1.6 trillion between 2020 and 2030, and that comes down to roughly $118 billion to $145 billion annually to implement its commitments to the Paris Agreement and also the nationally determined contributions. The African Adaptation Acceleration Program, AAP, is Africa's own program, supported by African heads of state, to mobilize more resources for climate change and to advance the objectives of the African Adaptation Initiative. The African Development Bank and the Global Center for Adaptation, we are mobilizing $25 billion for this program, which is the largest ever climate adaptation effort globally, for which the African Development Bank has already committed $12.5 billion. The AAP has an upstream facility, as you have heard, at the GCA, and a downstream facility at the African Development Bank. The upstream facility, which needs capitalization of $250 million, will help to mainstream solutions on climate adaptation. The downstream facility at the bank, to be capitalized at $1.75 billion, will help to leverage additional climate finance for adaptation by a factor of 4 times to deliver $7 billion of additional adaptation finance. The GCA and the African Development Bank are already showing very good results on the AAP. In fact, the AAP's upstream facility at the GCA with Patrick and their team has already helped to generate $3 billion of mainstreamed climate adaptation investments by the African Development Bank, from agriculture to energy to transport to water and sanitation. I wish to thank you very much, Alok, and also Vijay from the UK for your delivery on your promise of £20 million for the upstream facility at the GCA, which has already been fully disbursed. We now need full financing of the balance of $12.5 billion for the AAP. Your Excellencies, the African Development Fund's 16th replenishment now presents such a wonderful opportunity we must not miss. Never have the stakes been so high for Africa's low-income and fragile states that depend on the ADF. 9 out of the 10 countries most vulnerable to climate change in the world are in sub-Saharan Africa, and all of them, 100%, are all ADF countries. Yet the ADF countries do not have access to global finance on climate. To change this, the ADF has introduced what we call the Climate Action Window. This window is hoping to mobilize between $4 billion to $13 billion for climate adaptation for these ADF highly vulnerable countries. What will it do? It will be used to support 20 million farmers with access to climate-resilient agricultural technologies. Another 20 million farmers to get access, including pastoralists, to weather-indexed crop insurance, reviving 1 million hectares of degraded land and providing access for about 9.65 million people in terms of renewable energy. That's the scale of action that we are going to be forcing and driving. Commitments made by developed countries to provide $100 billion annually in climate finance for developing countries are long overdue. Your Excellencies, Africa can no longer wait. This is the time to support the African Adaptation Acceleration Program with the money that it needs. This is the time to support as well the African Development Fund's 16th replenishment. This is the time to support the climate action window of the ADF 16th replenishment. Your Excellencies, present here today are action shapers, from heads of state and government to the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, the African Union Commission's chairperson, the Vice President of the European Union Commission, development ministers to heads of global financial institutions, from the head of IMF, the head of WTO, bilateral agencies, multilateral development banks, and many more. If there was ever a group that can shape success and deliver climate adaptation for Africa, it is the leaders in this room today. You are the doers, and that's why you are here. So let's rise and deliver for Africa. Let's secure our common future. Let's put up the resources for climate adaptation in Africa. The past got us to where we are now. Now let us create a new path, a new future, our common future, where every African can thrive in a climate-secure world. We are grateful once again for coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, President Adesina. not only for your inspiring words, but particularly for your action on the ground, on the continent, indeed. So let us now turn to the heads of state, to the heads of government from Africa, being here in the Netherlands, being here in Rotterdam. And I have an extraordinary honor to introduce a person who is not only the head of state, but is also chairing the African continent for the year, who is a man who is extremely bold and very executive. And I'm sure, President Macky Sall, you have very clear expectations as well from this meeting. We're all very keen to hear it. President Macky Sall, thank you so much again.
Thank you very much, Professor Patrick Verkogen. Chers collègues, Monsieur le Président Nana Akufo-Addo, Président de la République du Ghana, chers collègues, Monsieur le Président Félix Tshisekedi Tshilombo, Président de la République démocratique du Congo, Mesdames et Messieurs, Monsieur le Président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Madame la Secrétaire générale adjointe des Nations Unies, Madame la Directrice générale du Fonds monétaire international, Madame la Directrice générale de l'OMC, Monsieur le Président de la BAD, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs à vos différents titres, chers amis. Je remercie le Centre mondial sur l'adaptation et surtout je félicite le dynamique CEO M. Verkogen, CEO du Centre mondial de l'adaptation, et je remercie le secrétaire général Ban Ki-moon, très engagé sur la cause de l'adaptation, ainsi que M. Feik Sijbesman, qui ont donné un contenu au bord de ce Conseil mondial de l'adaptation. Et merci donc pour avoir contribué à l'organisation de cette rencontre sur le financement de l'adaptation en Afrique. Et ceci à 2 mois du rendez-vous de Sharm el-Sheikh pour la COP27. Je tiens à saluer les dirigeants des institutions multilatérales ici présentes, les banques multilatérales de développement. Je salue aussi la BI et je salue tous les dirigeants qui sont dans cette salle. Mais je ne peux manquer de noter avec un goût d'amertume l'absence des dirigeants du monde industrialisé. Je pense que si nous avons fait l'effort de quitter l'Afrique, de venir à Rotterdam, il était plus facile quand même pour les Européens et les autres d'être là, puisque ce sont les principaux pollueurs de cette planète et c'est eux qui doivent financer l'adaptation. Donc s'ils sont absents dans cette salle, comme le constat est fait, si le secteur privé également est absent, qui est l'un des principaux pollueurs, ça nous donne un goût d'inachevé avant même de démarrer cette rencontre. Je me devais, en toute honnêteté, d'exprimer cette déception. L'Afrique, continent vulnérable au changement climatique, est en retard sur le processus d'adaptation. L'Afrique bénéficie très peu des financements et investissements verts, malgré l'existence de mécanismes dédiés. Pourtant, même s'ils polluent le moins et restent les plus vulnérables aux effets du réchauffement climatique, les pays africains demeurent pleinement engagés dans l'action climatique. La résilience des écosystèmes et la conservation de la biodiversité et de l'habitat naturel qui offrent tant à l'humanité. Ainsi, plus d'une décennie, et donc bien avant l'accord de Paris sur le climat, nous développons des projets majeurs, notamment le projet de la Grande Muraille Verte, qui regroupe 11 pays africains de la bande sahélo-sahélienne au sud du Sahara. Je rappelle que ce projet de la Grande Muraille Verte, doté d'un plan d'investissement prioritaire décennal sur 2021-2030, qui est un plan de 18 milliards de dollars, qui vise à soutenir des initiatives locales de reboisement, de restauration des terres et de création d'activités agro-silvopastorales génératrices de revenus. Ainsi, au titre de ces efforts internes, mon pays ambitionne de protéger 500 000 hectares de forêt, réaliser également 500 000 hectares de plantations et réduire de 90% ces superficies vulnérables aux feux de brousse. En outre, le Sénégal, parmi les pionniers dans la mise en œuvre de la Grande Muraille Verte, a versé l'année dernière une contribution volontaire de plus de 800 000 $ en appui à l'Agence panafricaine de la Grande Muraille Verte, en plus de ses cotisations statutaires. C'est juste une façon pour nous de marquer la priorité élevée que nous accordons à cette initiative continentale bâtie sur une vision à la fois écologique, climatique et humaniste, centrée sur l'homme et son cadre de vie. Le projet de la Grande Muraille Verte fait l'objet d'échanges réguliers au sein de la Convention de lutte contre la désertification, mais aussi des plaidoyers comme le One Planet Summit de janvier 2021 et la COP26 de Glasgow. Tous ces efforts ont permis de rendre plus visible le projet de la Grande Muraille Verte et suscitent des engagements financiers cumulés de l'ordre de 20 milliards de $. Nous attendons maintenant leur mobilisation. Il faut saluer cet élan solidaire. Mais ce qui fera la différence, c'est la mobilisation effective de ces ressources, en appui à la réalisation de projets concrets sur le terrain, au plus près des populations. Il faut dire que les engagements financiers de l'accord de Paris sur le climat et les nombreuses annonces en faveur de la résilience climatique et économique et de la relance post-pandémie Covid-19, il faut dire que tout cela tarde à se concrétiser. Il en est ainsi de 100 milliards de $ par an promis en soutien aux efforts d'adaptation et de réduction d'émissions des pays en développement, engagement qui aurait dû être matérialisé depuis 2020. Nous sommes bientôt fin 2022. Au demeurant, cet engagement n'est pas une faveur faite aux pays en développement, il faut le rappeler. Il s'agit de mettre en œuvre le principe agréé de responsabilité commune mais différenciée, dans le cadre des efforts solidaires que tous les pays doivent mener pour sauver la planète Terre, notre habitat commun. Ce principe traduit une approche équitable et solidaire des solutions au réchauffement. Quand des pays comme ceux de l'Afrique sont appelés à renoncer aux schémas pollueurs que d'autres ont suivis sur des siècles pour mettre toute la planète dans son état actuel d'urgence environnementale, il est juste et logique qu'en contrepartie, le coût de l'adaptation qui en découle soit partagé de façon équitable. C'est tout le sens de notre plaidoyer pour la mobilisation des annonces déjà faites, notamment l'engagement financier de 100 milliards de $ par an de 2020 à 2030, l'affectation à l'Afrique d'une partie des obligations vertes, les fameux green bonds, et autres investissements innovants, en rendant aussi les mécanismes d'accès aux finances climatiques plus simples et plus transparents. En plus de l'objectif visant à recueillir 25 milliards de $ d'ici 2025, nous attendons surtout du programme d'accélération de l'adaptation en Afrique. Nous attendons donc un accompagnement diligent en termes d'expertise pour l'accès des projets et initiatives éligibles au mécanisme de financement vert. Je sais que le Centre global pour l'adaptation travaille dans cette voie. C'est ainsi que le programme répondra de façon concrète aux objectifs qui lui sont assignés à travers ces 4 piliers que je rappelle: technologie numérique, intelligente pour l'agriculture et la sécurité alimentaire, la résilience des infrastructures, l'autonomisation des jeunes et les initiatives financières innovantes. Alors, une autre priorité pour nous concerne l'agriculture résiliente. Au mois de mai dernier, à l'initiative de la Banque africaine de développement, nous avons lancé un plan africain d'urgence pour la production alimentaire à hauteur de 1,5 milliard de dollars, avec comme objectif la production sur le continent de 37,6 millions de tonnes de céréales, de culture vivrière. Je salue la diligence du président Adesina. Et la BAD a déjà approuvé sur 2 mois 1,13 milliard de dollars en faveur de 26 pays africains. Et ce qui fait que déjà la campagne en cours agricole a pu être accompagnée. Je voudrais saluer cette diligence en ces temps de crise. Nous avons besoin de réactions rapides lorsque la situation est une situation d'urgence. L'Afrique est résolument déterminée à dépasser les actions contextuelles pour une transformation agricole adaptée au changement climatique, porteuse d'autosuffisance alimentaire et créatrice d'emplois. Mais pour ce faire, il nous faut développer le nexus énergie, eau, agriculture résiliente, qui assure la conjonction et la disponibilité des éléments de base, à savoir l'énergie verte, l'eau, l'engrais, des semences et gènes améliorés, ainsi que des équipements post-récolte, y compris la chaîne de froid et des magasins de stockage pour la conservation des produits. Il est important de rappeler que nous avons de très gros taux de pertes post-récolte en Afrique. Et c'est paradoxal. Alors nous avons d'ailleurs, en collaboration avec la BAD, la Banque africaine de développement, et le Sénégal, une conférence au mois de janvier prochain à Dakar qu'on appelle Feed Africa. C'est justement pour parler de manière concrète de ces sujets sur l'agriculture. Un autre point, et je vais m'arrêter sur ce point, mais très important pour nous, c'est le financement d'une transition énergétique juste et équitable, qui reste une priorité élevée pour l'Afrique. Je ne reviendrai pas sur ce qu'a dit le rapport de l'Agence internationale de l'énergie, sur l'hypothèse de l'utilisation du gaz africain sur 30 ans. Nous ne pourrions augmenter que de maximum 3,5 degrés. Enfin, nous ne serions responsables que de 3,5% des émissions de CO2. C'est-à-dire que nous sommes très loin de cet objectif. Alors, ce qui serait juste et équitable, c'est que l'Afrique continue ses efforts d'adaptation, s'il obtient les financements, mais dans le cadre d'une stratégie de mix énergétique. Une stratégie de mix qui permet d'avoir un baseload comme dans tous les pays du monde. Il faut une énergie de base qui permette de soutenir notre économie. On ne peut pas laisser l'Afrique simplement dans les énergies renouvelables. Là aussi, c'est un discours qu'il faut déconstruire. On n'a jamais vu un pays se développer uniquement avec des énergies renouvelables. Donc il faut que d'abord on accepte de nous accompagner dans un mix énergétique qui permette un baseload, qui permette une énergie compétitive à bon marché. Et bien entendu, il faut le maximum d'énergie renouvelable pour accompagner ce mix. Et déjà, nous y travaillons. Mon pays, aujourd'hui, a 31% d'énergie renouvelable. C'est énorme. Mais on ne peut pas ne pas mettre du gaz, ou si on avait une autre source fossile, de la mettre également pour atténuer le coût de l'énergie sur nos économies. Nous faisons du renouvelable. Nous avons déjà un projet de 1000 villages financé grâce au Fonds vert et à la Banque ouest-africaine de développement, qui sera financé bientôt. Et c'est dire qu'avec les réserves en ressources naturelles, le continent détient un formidable potentiel aussi en hydrogène vert, sans émission de CO2, pouvant répondre à ses propres besoins en énergie et répondre aux besoins mondiaux pour contribuer à la neutralité carbone. C'est dire que, je vais m'arrêter là, qu'il nous reste moins de 10 ans sur le chrono mondial 2030 de l'action climatique et du développement durable. Il reste 8 ans précisément. Au-delà des effets d'annonce, il urge de faire face à nos obligations collectives de justice climatique et d'équité économique et sociale vis-à-vis de l'Afrique. Mobilisons-nous donc ensemble pour relever et solidairement les défis globaux qui transcendent les frontières et impactent la vie sur Terre. Il y va de l'intérêt et de la responsabilité de chacun de nos pays, parce que ce n'est pas seulement le sort de l'Afrique qui est en jeu, mais aussi l'avenir de la planète et le destin de l'humanité. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, also for reminding us that the adaptation agenda is a people-centered agenda, for reminding us and inspiring us that this is a growth agenda, a jobs agenda, a development agenda, but also being very explicit, which is the right thing to do, that we are still climbing the mountain and that we have to work also with those who are not in a room today. So let's commit to that we will do so in the run-up to Sharm el-Sheikh indeed. I also would like to acknowledge that the President of Ethiopia is indeed online and will come to you, Madam, very, very soon. But again, President Macky Sall, thank you very much for your leadership on the continent. Let us now turn to another African leader who not only represents his own country, but in fact represents 55 of the most vulnerable nations in the world as chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. President Akufo-Addo, you have the floor, sir.
Co-chairs, Your Excellencies, participants, ladies and gentlemen, I thank the conveners of this summit, the Global Center on Adaptation, GCA, the African Development Bank, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and His Excellency, Monsieur Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal and current Chair of the African Union, for the invitation to participate in this event. I would like, for my part, to associate myself also wholly with the sentiments of President Macky Sall about the failure of certain vested interests to be present here with us at this meeting. This is a critical moment for the African continent in the lead-up to the African Conference of the Parties, which we're also calling for very good reasons, the implementation COP. Excellencies, we're aware of the current geopolitical circumstances. Food and energy security are at risk across the world. Inflation is rapidly rising, and the climate change threatens the progress we have made, especially in Africa. COVID-19, which resulted in sub-Saharan's first recession in some 25 years, is still hurting Africa. Some 26 million people fell into extreme poverty, and 30 million jobs were lost due to the repercussions of the pandemic in Africa. My country, Ghana, is attempting to use her own fiscal resources to address these risks. The same is true for other African countries. However, the growing food and fuel crises are limiting severely our fiscal space to respond effectively as the cost of borrowing goes up prohibitively and access to the capital market tightens dramatically. Africa contributes the least to the climate emergency, responsible for less than 4% of global emissions. Yet we are facing increasing and more intense climate-related extreme events. We are indeed at a crossroads. If we want our continent to thrive, we have to adapt to climate change. And to achieve this, adaptation financing needs to start flowing at scale. Climate action must not become another casualty of the complex geopolitical era that we are experiencing. Last year's COP26 in Glasgow was a great moment of hope, with its pledge to double global climate adaptation finance by 2025. With the implementation COP ahead of us in just a few weeks in Sharm el-Sheikh, in the Arab Republic of Egypt, now is the moment of truth. It is time to turn words into deeds and ambition into action. With the world in flames and under floodwaters, the eyes of people everywhere will be on the decision makers at COP27. They have to deliver if they are to escape the censure of history. Excellencies, I want to thank Professor Patrick Vercoyen, CEO of the GCA for its tireless leadership in mobilizing the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, AAAP, together with Dr. Adesina, the dynamic president of the African Development Bank. The AAAP, with its laser focus on food security, resilient infrastructure, climate finance, and youth employment, is Africa's solution to the multiple crises we face. The program intends to mobilize some $25 billion over 5 years to scale up and accelerate adaptation action. The African Development Bank has, in a truly laudable gesture, committed to providing half of the amount. This is evidence that Africa has the leadership and determination to engage in solutions to her own problems. But Africa needs its friends from across the world also to scale up their support for concrete adaptation solutions delivered through the AAAP. We expect these friends to manifest their solidarity and friendship by delivering the other half, just as we believe the time is long overdue for the developed countries to make good on their annual $100 billion pledge for climate adaptation. As chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, Ghana will also push COP27 to deliver on the commitment to doubling adaptation finance alongside other priorities. Financing climate adaptation makes economic sense. It is much more cost-effective than paying the bills every time they're due for increasingly frequent and severe climate shocks and disasters. As a middle-income country, Ghana stands to lose out of the effects of more acute and frequent climate hazards. Thankfully, through the AAAP, we're making progress in addressing the climate emergency. The Ghana Roadmap for Climate Resilient Infrastructure, which was launched earlier this year, provides an investment blueprint for adaptation in Ghana, highlighting in stark terms the cost of inaction. By 2050, climate impacts could lead to some $4 billion in damages to the transport sector. As a consequence, 80% of women and girls could lose access to health care. With AAAP support, the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund will access the Green Climate Fund to finance adaptation interventions to mitigate these risks for a safer, more prosperous future. We expect these initiatives to deliver tangible progress towards Ghana's adaptation and development objectives. By laying the foundation now, we bestow to future generations stronger, safer, and healthier communities. Young people have done the least to cause climate change, and yet will suffer its impact the most. Across Africa, the continent with the world's youngest population, we must scale up the solutions that deliver green jobs and resilient livelihoods. It is for them and future generations that we must all come together and use this summit as a turning point to create a more prosperous, greener, and fairer world. We cannot fail in this endeavor, as success is the greatest inheritance that we can leave for the current and future generations. Africa must close the adaptation financing gap. We cannot wait. I look forward to the swift implementation of the AAAP. The fate of our continent and of our common humanity on this planet depends on it. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, President Akufo-Addo, also reminding us indeed that conflict, COVID, and climate needs to be addressed together in an integrated manner. And also, again, congratulations for your role as chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. We as GCA are very honored to be the managing partner and secretariat to this important body indeed. Let's turn to a man who reminded us just before Glasgow that Africa was tired of waiting. Who reminded us just before Glasgow that there is the plan, there is the commitment, but now we need action. President Tshisekedi, you have the floor, sir.
Merci, cher Patrick. Excellence, Monsieur Macky Sall, président de la République du Sénégal et président en exercice de l'Union africaine. Excellence, Monsieur Nana Akufo-Addo, président de la République du Ghana. Madame la vice-secrétaire générale des Nations Unies, Monsieur le Président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Madame la directrice générale de l'Organisation mondiale du commerce, Madame la directrice générale du Fonds monétaire international, Monsieur le Président de la Banque africaine de développement, Monsieur Ban Ki-moon, secrétaire général honoraire des Nations Unies et co-chair de du Global Center of Adaptation, Monsieur le Président de la COP26, Monsieur le Directeur exécutif du Centre mondial sur l'adaptation, cher Patrick, Mesdames et Messieurs, en vos rangs, titres et qualités, distingués invités, je suis heureux de prendre part à ces importantes assises consacrées à l'adaptation en Afrique. À mon tour, je voudrais également déplorer l'absence des leaders des nations industrialisées, ainsi que des représentants du secteur privé, qui sont, comme on le sait, les plus grands pollueurs et qui auraient eu des réponses ici, immédiates, à nos questions. Mais qu'à cela ne tienne, je suis convaincu qu'ils entendront parler de la portée de cet événement, pour lequel d'ailleurs je tiens à remercier les organisateurs de m'avoir invité à partager mes réflexions et porter la voix, ainsi que l'expérience de la République démocratique du Congo qui se positionne véritablement en pays solution face à la menace que représentent les changements climatiques. Nous savons tous combien le dérèglement climatique inhibe les efforts de développement sur le continent africain. Comme vous le savez, l'année dernière, j'ai assuré la présidence de l'Union africaine avant de passer le relais à mon cher frère, le président Macky Sall de la République du Sénégal. Ce mandat m'a permis notamment de prendre la vraie mesure des effets négatifs du changement climatique tels qu'ils se sont produits non seulement dans mon pays, la République démocratique du Congo, mais bien plus. J'ai constaté de visu les ravages énormes causés par le changement climatique dans d'autres régions et pays d'Afrique. Il se pose dès lors le sentiment d'injustice ressenti par le peuple africain. En effet, le continent africain est celui qui a le moins d'impact sur le changement climatique, mais paradoxalement subit la majorité des conséquences de ces fléaux. Mesdames et messieurs, en 2015, conscients de l'impact accru du changement climatique en Afrique, les pays africains ont lancé l'initiative d'adaptation pour l'Afrique afin de réduire la vulnérabilité du continent face au changement climatique. 7 ans plus tard, les effets de la mise en œuvre de cette initiative se font encore attendre. Les fonds promis ne sont pas versés. Nos partenaires de développement s'étaient engagés à nous attribuer 100 milliards de dollars par an avant 2020. Ces fonds devaient servir à appuyer les efforts faits par les pays en développement. Mais force est de constater que cet engagement n'a pas été respecté. Entre-temps, les impacts qui devaient se produire avant 2020 ont augmenté de façon spectaculaire. Les événements climatiques extrêmes ont gagné en fréquence et en intensité. Leurs impacts ont même dépassé l'afflux des fonds du climat. Mesdames et messieurs, il ressort dès lors de l'engagement à nous verser quelques 100 milliards de dollars par an, paraît soudain bien en deçà de ce qui serait nécessaire. Pour être précis avec les chiffres, alors que l'on estime que l'Afrique aurait besoin d'environ 36 milliards de dollars par an pour faire face aux impacts négatifs actuels du changement climatique, elle n'en perçoit que 6 milliards en ce moment. L'Afrique est lésée à la fois par le changement climatique et par le financement climatique. Pour vous donner une idée de ce que cela représente, retenez qu'au cours des premiers mois de la pandémie de la Covid-19, environ 11 000 milliards de dollars avaient été levés dans le monde. Alors que nous luttions déjà contre l'impact du changement climatique, la Covid-19 et la tempête économique de la flambée des prix du carburant et des denrées alimentaires sont venues s'ajouter, frappant ainsi durement l'Afrique. La pandémie a plongé l'Afrique subsaharienne dans sa première récession depuis plus d'un quart de siècle. Elle a pratiquement stoppé l'élan du continent vers le développement économique. En tant que président de l'Union africaine, j'avais dirigé l'élaboration du plan d'action pour la relance verte de l'Union africaine qui portait à la fois sur la Covid-19 et le changement climatique. Il nous fallait affronter ces deux crises en même temps. J'ai donc été heureux que le Centre mondial pour l'adaptation et la Banque africaine de développement s'associent en créant le programme d'accélération de l'adaptation en Afrique qui est aligné sur le plan d'action pour la relance verte. Le programme est unique en ce sens que son objectif est de mobiliser environ 25 milliards de dollars d'ici 2025 auprès de toutes les sources. Ces fonds doivent servir à intensifier et à accélérer l'action d'adaptation climatique sur le continent africain. La Banque africaine de développement s'est engagée à en fournir la moitié. Lorsque nous nous sommes rencontrés à Glasgow durant la COP26, la décision a été prise que les nations développées doubleraient leur contribution financière pour l'adaptation au climat d'ici 2025. Nous avons besoin d'être sûrs que ce financement est disponible et qu'il contribue à financer ce qui fonctionne déjà en Afrique. Le programme africain d'accélération pour l'adaptation fonctionne très bien sur le continent et nous félicitons la Banque africaine de développement ainsi que le Centre global pour l'adaptation pour la mise en place de ce nouveau programme qui présente un potentiel prometteur pour l'Afrique. J'invite les donateurs à désormais fournir le financement nécessaire pour assurer le succès de cette initiative. Le moment pour le faire, c'est maintenant. Je suis très satisfait de voir que la Banque africaine de développement est en première ligne pour garantir que les pays africains à faible revenu aient les ressources nécessaires pour s'adapter au changement climatique. Le dernier rapport du panel intergouvernemental sur le changement climatique démontre très clairement que l'Afrique est le continent le plus vulnérable au changement climatique. Par conséquent, la Climate Action Window du Fonds africain de développement est une excellente chose pour l'Afrique. J'appelle l'ensemble des donateurs du Fonds africain de développement à faire des contributions substantielles pour une recapitalisation réussie du fonds et un financement intégral de sa Climate Action Window. L'adaptation est essentielle pour créer un avenir plus prospère. C'est pourquoi le programme d'accélération de l'adaptation en Afrique est le plan de l'Afrique que nous devrions tous soutenir. Mesdames et messieurs, en République démocratique du Congo, nous avons fourni des efforts importants pour préserver nos forêts. Elles représentent non seulement un moyen de subsistance pour les populations, mais elles contribuent grandement à absorber nos faibles émissions, ainsi que les émissions mondiales. Ça, il faut le dire. Nos forêts jouent donc un rôle fondamental pour pour renforcer notre résilience face au changement climatique. Nanti de ses ressources naturelles, en particulier sa riche biodiversité, la République démocratique du Congo ambitionne d'être un leader mondial dans l'utilisation de solutions fondées sur la nature pour renforcer sa résilience. Il nous manque toutefois les ressources financières qui pourraient nous aider à contribuer à une solution bénéfique pour tous au changement climatique, mettant à la fois en place des instruments d'atténuation et d'adaptation. J'invite donc nos partenaires de développement de soutenir le programme d'accélération de l'adaptation en Afrique afin de nous aider à atteindre les objectifs que nous nous sommes assignés. À travers ce programme, l'Afrique peut contribuer de manière significative à la réalisation de l'objectif mondial de l'adaptation. Or, ce programme nous contraint à mobiliser des ressources financières substantielles. Le lancement du programme d'accélération de l'adaptation en Afrique mobilise 250 millions de dollars américains pour financer la facilité de financement en amont qu'il héberge afin de soutenir son travail. Ces activités contribueront à intensifier et à accélérer l'adaptation au changement climatique en Afrique. La facilité de financement en amont du programme d'accélération de l'adaptation en Afrique s'aligne sur la 16e reconstitution en cours du Fonds africain de développement et sa fenêtre climatique afin de fournir des investissements en aval. Ces investissements renforceront la résilience en Afrique et contribueront à la réalisation de l'objectif de développement durable sur le continent. Je félicite donc le Centre mondial pour l'adaptation d'avoir également veillé à ce que la facilité de financement en amont du programme d'accélération de l'adaptation en Afrique soutienne aussi la bonne mise en œuvre régionale du nouveau Fonds fiduciaire pour la résilience et la durabilité du Fonds monétaire international. Il contribue à tirer parti de l'innovation et des partenariats multipartites. L'Afrique a besoin de toutes les ressources qu'elle peut obtenir pour lutter contre le changement climatique. Excellences, Messieurs les chefs d'État, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, mon pays se réjouit d'accueillir le mois prochain les discussions en prélude de la COP27. J'attends avec impatience un engagement renouvelé de nos partenaires et la concrétisation des engagements passés préalablement avant la COP27 qui se tiendra en Égypte, en terre africaine. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Tshisekedi also reminding us that money is there in the global system, but it has to flow to Africa. It has to flow on adaptation. Let us now turn to virtually. We're going to go now to Africa. President of Ethiopia, President Chedi, is waiting for us. Let's see whether the connection works. Madam President, please, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much. Excellences, Monsieur le Président Macky Sall, Président en exercice de l'Union africaine, Excellencies, President Nana Akufo-Addo from Ghana and President Tshisekedi of the DRC, my dear sisters and brothers present in the room, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank you for arranging the possibility to join you virtually at this Africa Adaptation Summit. And I would like to thank former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the President of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, and the CEO of Global Center of Adaptation, Professor Patrick Vercoen, for organizing this summit and for their unwavering commitment. The timing is especially critical as we all look forward to COP27 in Egypt, the Africa COP. If extreme weather catastrophes over the past weeks have not convinced us that climate change is happening, we are in a dangerous state of denial. Across the globe, countries have been confronted with extreme weather conditions, drought, flooding, wildfires, unprecedented heat of waves, increased desertification. It has been said by the previous speaker, and I will repeat it. Africa is suffering enormously from the devastating effects of climate change. This is serious in the whole of Africa due to the droughts in East Africa. In the past 2 years, we've been barely had rains. This has serious implications for food security, has decimated a lot of livestock, affecting the livelihoods and incomes of pastoralists and causing displacement of population as they search for water. To say that Africa, which suffers losses of 7 to 15 billion per year, which could rise to 50 billion per year by 2040, is clearly the most vulnerable region of the world, is not in any way an exaggeration. Amid this, there is some hope, and hope we need. In Ethiopia, we're witnessing a huge transformation in wheat production in irrigated perimeters due to access to farmers to wheat-tolerant wheat varieties with the support of the African Development Bank. The bank's technologies for African agricultural transformation has been providing Ethiopian farmers with those seeds. The cultivated area under these heat-tolerant wheat varieties increased from 5,000 hectares in 2019 to reach 655 hectares now. This will definitely allow Ethiopia to be self-sufficient in wheat production. We have not imported wheat this year, and the plan is to become, of course, a net exporter of wheat. The Green Legacy Initiative in Ethiopia, by promoting green culture, aims to significantly decarbonize the economy of the country while improving livelihoods and socioeconomic development of citizens. Over 20 million citizens are involved in regreening Ethiopia every year. This initiative has motivated the establishment of several thousands of nurseries that are able to raise billions of seedlings every year. The lesson is clear. We must do all to scale up access of farmers in Africa to climate-resilient agricultural technologies. I wish to commend the Global Center on Adaptation and the African Development Bank for their bold action plan, the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, which has set a goal of mobilizing $25 billion for climate adaptation in Africa. We should all support this effort. I wish the presidential dialogue between African heads of states and governments and other global leaders had taken place in order to accelerate progress in mobilizing support and resources for the AAAP. I join leaders who have spoken before me in deploring their absence. And in fact, to be a bit bold, sometimes we should not appear to be talking to each other while those who should be with us are not present. This program is a game changer for Africa, the AAAP on climate adaptation. I call on all the development partners to fund this program. By doing so, we will assure that Africa can build climate resilience. We call for a substantive 16th replenishment of the African Development Fund, and especially to boost its capacity to deliver climate actions at scale through its climate action window. We need ADF to climate-proof Africa. Let's make the slogan, "Together we will build a more climate-resilient Africa," a reality. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for a very bold statement indeed. And let's work together in the coming weeks and months ahead of us to drive this adaptation agenda forward indeed. The Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program was indeed conceptualized by many of you here around the table, but there was one person who was there from the beginning. There was one person who has coordinated all partners on the continent to come forward in a united way. It's a very important chairperson of a very important institution. He's also a member of the board of the Global Center on Adaptation. Chairperson, Moussa Faki, you have the floor, sir.
Excellence, Monsieur Macky Sall, Président de la République du Sénégal, Président en exercice de l'Union africaine, Excellence Nana Akufo-Addo, Président de la République du Ghana, Excellence Félix-Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo, Président de la République démocratique du Congo, Madame Amina Mohamed, Secrétaire générale adjointe des Nations Unies, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Monsieur Ban Ki-moon, ancien secrétaire général des Nations Unies et président du Global Center on Adaptation, Professeur Patrick Verkogen, CEO du Global Center on Adaptation, Dr Akin Adesina, président de la Banque africaine de développement, Dr Ngouzi, directrice générale de l'OMC, Madame Kristina Georgieva, directrice générale du FMI, Mesdames et Messieurs distingués participants. Je voudrais exprimer notre gratitude au Global Center on Adaptation et au gouvernement des Pays-Bas pour l'invitation à participer à cet important événement et pour l'accueil chaleureux. Merci à Monsieur le maire de Rotterdam, Monsieur Abou Talib, surtout d'avoir réussi à maintenir un climat semblable à celui de l'Afrique aujourd'hui à Rotterdam. Mesdames et Messieurs, nous sommes à un moment de vérité, à un moment d'action. Il y a péril en la demeure planète. J'ai fait mienne l'observation du président Macky Sall sur la regrettable absence des dirigeants européens à cette rencontre. Permettez-moi, Mesdames et Messieurs, de faire 4 remarques fort succinctes. La première est relative au constat. Les meilleures données scientifiques à notre disposition montrent que l'Afrique reste un contributeur marginal aux émissions de gaz à effet de serre responsables du changement climatique. L'Afrique n'est responsable que de 3% de la détérioration globale. Le deuxième élément du constat indique que le continent a pris l'option de contribuer à la solution mondiale à travers des efforts au niveau national, par des plans d'adaptation souvent soutenus par des allocations budgétaires. À ce titre, je rappelle que l'Afrique consacre entre 2 et 5% de son PIB à l'adaptation au changement climatique. Le troisième élément de constat réside dans la part incongrue de l'Afrique dans le volume global d'investissement dans la lutte contre la dégradation des conditions climatiques. Ce bref constat montre un déséquilibre patent entre la responsabilité de l'Afrique et le volume des ressources en sa faveur. C'est là que réside l'une des plus choquantes injustices à l'égard de ce continent. Ce constat est d'autant plus frappant que l'Afrique s'est dotée d'un arsenal juridique solide et diversifié pour prendre en charge sa part dans l'adaptation au changement climatique. En sus de la volonté politique affichée, le continent a mis en place de nombreuses structures, dont notamment le comité des chefs d'État et de gouvernement sur le changement climatique, CAOS, la stratégie et le plan d'action de l'Union africaine sur le changement climatique et le développement résilient, qui constitue la politique continentale en matière de changement climatique. Cette stratégie couvre l'ensemble du spectre de l'adaptation et du développement à faible émission de carbone. Pour couronner cet effort, l'Union africaine a en juillet dernier adopté la position commune africaine sur l'accès à l'énergie et la transition juste. Le deuxième point que je voudrais soulever concerne l'acuité de réponse rapide aux exigences africaines. Il faut souligner ici qu'on ne peut pas parler d'atteindre le net zéro alors qu'environ 54% de la population africaine, estimée à 1,3 milliard d'habitants, est toujours privée d'électricité, ne connaît même pas l'électricité. Tandis que les nations développées se sont servies sans limite des énergies fossiles avant d'amorcer le questionnement sur la transition écologique. L'Afrique au potentiel gazier notamment important continue de végéter dans la non-industrialisation. Une exception africaine s'impose ici. Cela devrait commencer par l'adhésion au principe de la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques, dont des responsabilités communes mais différenciées. Si la question n'est pas traitée à travers l'adaptation et autres mesures pertinentes, le changement climatique aura des effets dramatiques sur le continent. Nous le vivons déjà au Sahel, dans le bassin du lac Tchad, dans la Corne de l'Afrique, les phénomènes El Niño à l'est et à la partie australe du continent le démontrent. La troisième remarque porte sur le financement. C'est là où le bas blesse. Le but esquissé pour le financement climatique destiné à l'adaptation en Afrique est loin d'être atteint. Du montant total de ces financements, seuls 21% en sont destinés à l'adaptation. Chers amis, l'optimisme BA ici n'est pas permis. Des chiffres faramineux ont été souvent annoncés, mais jamais réalisés. Bien évidemment, nous nous félicitons de l'engagement du pacte de Glasgow de doubler le financement d'ici 2025. J'espère qu'au moment où nous avançons à grands pas vers la tenue de la COP27 à Sharm el-Sheikh en Égypte, de tels engagements seront rigoureusement tenus. Dans le contexte fiscal actuel de la plupart des pays africains, qui subissent l'impact disproportionné de la pandémie de la Covid-19, de la crise énergétique, alimentaire et sécuritaire actuelle, une réflexion sur l'alignement de l'allègement de la dette souveraine aux objectifs du climat mérite d'être engagée. Une telle réflexion à laquelle nous appelons doit nécessairement s'ajuster aux spécificités de toutes les catégories de nos économies en Afrique. La quatrième remarque porte sur la construction de la solidarité internationale. Bien que l'Afrique, comme je l'ai souligné dans mon propos si haut, subit une insupportable double injustice, elle ne cesse de donner les gages de son attachement à la construction de nouveaux modèles de multilatéralisme climatique. Les pays africains ont démontré ici un sens élevé de leadership en étant à la hauteur. Nous restons engagés en faveur d'une action mondiale collective sur la base de notre objectif commun, dont la réalisation suppose un degré d'engagement solidaire pour faire face dans l'équité à nos obligations forcément différenciées. Ainsi, aura-t-on peut-être déconstruit, M. Macky Sall, les discours sur l'Afrique. Je vous remercie.